Welcome to the Modern Dad Show. I'm
Welcome.
Chandru Bajwani.
And I'm Carl Lyons.
And we are Modern Dads, which is
Dad's figuring out what it is to be modern.
still figuring it out.
Yeah, so what I was going to raise today was the subject of homework, actually.
Right.
It's got a couple of aspects to it. One is the amount of homework. So I've got a kid in year 5, for example, and she's getting daily homework at the moment, homework that's got to be in the next day. So that's one aspect, the kind of frequency and the amount of homework, because we get some stuff over the weekend as well. And the other aspect of homework is all about the level of some of the maths that you've got to do and some of the kind of literacy. My first degree was as a mechanical engineer, actually. You know, I've had some exposure to maths, but even I'm having to Google some of the maths homework that my primary school kid is getting at the moment. So this is tough stuff. Yeah.
Immediately, I think you've got to cut out all the extracurricular activities. So that's the
Eating
first thing.
and sleeping, all of that kind of stuff. You mean? Yeah.
And the other thing is, I mean, personally, my kids haven't reached that stage of homework yet, and I'm a little nervous about it because apparently the jump from no homework to an excessive amount of homework is quite exponential. I know of some schools that don't have any homework.
Wow.
They charge an arm and a leg for admission. It's difficult to get in, but they're incredibly successful.
All right.
The kids love it, and there's no homework. And it's interesting how they achieve their level of success without work and having time for extracurricular activities. I don't know what they're putting in the school lunches, which is something we can discuss down the line.
That kind of raises a broader question, doesn't it, about how we measure success, actually, because what it seems to me, the homework is geared towards academic excellence. Fair enough, fine, but often they measure success via the testing process that they go through. So, you know, where do the kids sit in terms of the national standards and compared to other schools and other kids? And I wonder whether that is the best way of measuring success, to be honest.
Firstly, because you have to keep up with the national standards, that's your motivation to an extent, as opposed to catering for the students.
Right.
Girls mature faster than boys, so they need a different level of attention. Is that catered for? And the second thing is, I, for the longest time, have not believed that examinations is the best way to test a student's knowledge. Putting a child in a pressure situation with a time limit, I don't think that's fair, because the kid might know everything he needs to know or she needs to know, but this is not the best way to test it.
And what you're describing, actually, in some ways, is the difference between knowledge and understanding. So, maybe a test, you know, what knowledge you have, what you've retained for that moment, but it doesn't necessarily test understanding.
I'm glad you brought that up about understanding, because when I was in school, I studied classical civilization, which, you know, clearly served me well. That's when I first came across you. I read about you in the book.
I was one of the subjects.
Yeah, you were. So in classical civilization, I studied about Oedipus. They had a theory which they drummed into the kids that this is why Oedipus's life turned out the way it did. Yeah. So when the time came for the examination, I wrote exactly what they had drummed into me. But I sort of segued and said, but there's also this possibility, which I suggested, which I brought forward. And I was graded down for it. As opposed to be recognized for thinking outside the box and having an understanding that was beyond what was being taught and considering other options.
You were penalized for independent thinking. Yeah.
I was penalized. And I don't agree with that, because right there, you're just basically trying to make every kid like every other kid.
We are Borg.
Yeah, I'm kind of worried about that. And I'm not sure if that whole philosophy gives our kids what they need when they get out into the marketplace.
Exactly. I mean, if everyone's thinking one way, where's the innovation coming from? You know, where's the Elon Musk and Zuckerbergs?
Yeah.
Well,
absolutely.
Zuckerberg's a little iffy right now. Talking about the people that are educating our kids. When I was studying English literature, I wasn't getting good grades, but I had a gut feeling that the teacher wasn't marking me fairly.
Right.
So I took an article from the newspaper, The Times, allegedly.
I think the word you're looking for is plagiarized, isn't it?
Allegedly. It was copied word for word, allegedly. And when the teacher graded it, she was grading an article by a journalist in the Times. B+. Right there, you're not being graded completely on your work and your efforts and your knowledge. there's also another bias involved.
So we're talking about creativity, we're talking about independent thinking here, and how the education system doesn't necessarily
It stifles it to an extent. At least that's my
I think
worry.
you're right. And here's the dilemma for me, and maybe the dilemma for other parents, I'm not sure, but you're either in the system or you're not, in a sense. So I kind of resist that, because I think some of these things, there's some resistance here from me about primary school kids having this level of homework and kind of studying this hard. I would like them to be, being kids a lot more, but actually I'm in the system, so I've got to kind of play the game.
Don't hate the player, hate the game, son.
And that's the problem. There's no kind of middle ground, in a sense. So even though I don't agree with or feel comfortable with a lot of the stuff that's happening in the school, what's my alternatives?
I mean, your alternative is to go to one of the other schools, pay a hefty fee, and not worry about homework.
Right.
But then there's another aspect of it. It's as much about the education that they're offering as well as the networking opportunity.
This is the truth, right?
Yeah.
That's what you pay for when you get into these big independent schools.
So growing up, I saw some kids gravitate towards a particular school who were of a particular social standing.
Yeah.
And they sort of gathered together. And then they made connections, networks. It's kind of like a fraternity.
You were on the outside of that with your nose pressed against the glassway, isn't it?
Well, I'm sitting here with you, so yes.
My eldest daughter's got a year to go before she starts thinking about secondary school. So, that private education system that you've just described and being part of that club, to get in that club, this is what you've got to go through. This is about the whole education system.
It's the system.
Basically. The whole system, yeah, absolutely.
The schools are in the system. The schools aren't setting the system. They are in the system, and they're also sort of trying to keep up. So, again, it's a whole case of don't hate the player, hate the game.
But seriously, we'd like to hear what your thoughts are about that whole subject matter, whether you've got similar experiences, and what are the alternatives. I'd be really interested if there are any alternatives, to be honest.
I completely agree. If you have any petition that we can sign anonymously, we'd be happy to do so.
Yeah, you are committed to this.
But anyway, thank you so much for tuning in.
Thanks a lot.
Look forward to your thoughts, and tune in next week.
Look forward to hearing from you. Thank you. Well, I'm not sure what the most surprising thing about that story is. Maybe the fact that you studied English literature, to be honest. 'Cause
Allegedly.
I've read some of your books, yeah. So